Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me, Dan?
Again,
Okay, we can hear you perfectly.
awesome.
Um, Welcome, everyone. Delighted to have you here at the Digital Transformation Center, hosted by Hive here at the University of Louisville. Today, we're going to have three segments from 9 to 10. We have the honor of having Dan Murphy from Slingshot, and then we'll go to take a break at 10, and then we'll have another speaker, and then we'll do another one at 11. Like to brag on Dan. He and his colleagues have started a company many years ago, and I'll let him talk about Slingshot and some of the endeavors that they have. So he's going to kind of give the overview. What is a company doing, and how are they addressing issues utilizing AI? So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, and he's an alumni. I think we said 2005. I'm not sure. Many, many years ago. A very experienced expert. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks. I want to try to move that window for you all, but I'm having technical difficulties. So I'm just going to dive on in.
You can minimize it.
I can't see it. Hold on. We're having technical difficulties because I'm an expert.
There went. Well, okay.
Did it come back?
There we go.
Now if I can see my presentation. Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon. So we got a lot to cover in the time that I have here, so I'm going to dive right in. But I started playing around with ChatGPT in the spring of last year, and I really just wanted to better understand just what it was capable of. And then I would read a bunch of stuff online, and it would talk about how others were using it. And so I have a strong interest in psychology, self-reflection, and things like that. And so I started using ChatGPT to analyze my dreams from a Jungian thought perspective, or reflecting on something that happened during my day from a Buddhist psychology perspective. And it was real fun. And I guess it was the first day of school last year. So my oldest was going into 8th grade and my youngest was going into 6th grade. And I was super excited to see how their days went. And when they got home, it was very evident that it did not go well. My oldest had some type of interaction with her best friend, miscommunication, and she was crying. My youngest was still dealing with some anxiety and she was crying. And then my wife looked exhausted and she was on the verge of tears and told me she needed to take a nap. So I validated their experience. And then I was like, all right, I got to solve the problem. So I went and created my first custom GPT, and I called it Therapy Dog at the time. It is since now a guide dog. But what I was able to do was craft a custom GPT that focused on all of the ways that I was using ChatGPT to support me emotionally, but put it into a container. And it was an empathetic listener that would lead with compassion, with the whole goal that, my family's going to use this and they're not going to cry as much. As you can imagine, my daughters wanted nothing to do with it. So my wife, I think at one point she said, true story, I don't want to play with your stupid robot. But after some coaxing, I got her to engage with it. And after 30 minutes of messing with it, she came down, and I swear she had tears in her eyes. She's like, we just had a bonding experience. I've never felt so seen and heard. So that was a year ago, and I'm on my 4th iteration, and I continue to learn how custom GPTs work and prompting and how do we secure our prompts and the things that we build. But over that time, just the landscape of AI has changed a lot too. So I'm just going to kind of walk through some topics today to kind of work through my understanding of what the landscape changed, the impact it has on my work life, the impact it's having on kind of my personal life, and some other things just from you all to consider. So before we dive into the fun stuff, I do want to level set. I think this is important. A lot of you may already know this, but I'm going to say it again for redundancy. So AI has been around since the 50s, and it encompasses a lot of different technologies. It's not just what we know today is generative AI, and even generative AI is a part of the AI landscape. So when you think about AI, think about machine learning. So if you use Netflix, Amazon, or Spotify, and it recommends something to you, that's AI. If you use your face to open your phone, facial recognition, that's AI. If you're think about robotics, so auto manufacturing, it's easy, but if you got a Roomba at home, that's AI. So when we're talking about kind of these tools we're using today, we're speaking specifically to generative AI, and all of that bubble is being driven by large language models. So large language models are really just text-based predictive engines, and you can overlay other capabilities with audio and images and video. So that makes them multimodal. So most of your large language models today are multimodal, meaning that they can accept data coming in a variety of forms, and they can do something with it. So like I said, it's not magic, it's just math. And it feels like magic because of the way that these models can respond to our questions. But again, it's just predicting the next word in the answer that it's getting you. So if you have a response from a model that's got 200 words, you can assume that it's gone around the model 200 times. So it's your question, and then the first word of the answer goes back to the model, gets the second word, goes back to the model, gets the third word. So that's happening constantly. So it's really just a predictive engine that is really good of intuiting kind of the way that you are talking emotionally, and then being able to give that back to you so it seems really very real, which is kind of cool. Let's talk about myths versus reality. I do want to call out that every image you see here was AI generated based off a prompt that I got from ChatGPT, based off the bullets that I had that I wanted to cover in each slide. So yeah, it's very, very meta. So anyway, so I think it's important when we're internalizing this information that we're seeing around generative AI, that CEOs and investors have a huge incentive to talk about the things that they can do and the things that they might do. It leads to more users, it leads to more investments. I don't know if you all are paying attention to the market, but you really got like 7 companies that are holding up the market right now with all of the investment that's being dumped into the AI sphere, if you will. Going along with that, big media really likes to embellish. I don't know if you are aware of that, but it likes to throw out things for clickbait. So whether it's like dreaming really big or it's giving us the gloom and doom, they make money off of that. So I think that is contributing to some of this disconnection between what's really happening and what can be. I also think that it's where we're getting a lot of the hype. And so if you look below the surface of the stories, you can see that there is a lot of hype. And I mean, I'll show you later on one of these slides, it still couldn't spell perplexity correct. So there is a lot of room for growth, and I think it is growing. The other thing I find really interesting too that might be driving this big disconnection is that, at least from what I read, China is approaching AI from how do we build better tools to better serve our communities and our society. The United States is really pushing for artificial general intelligence. So I think just those two approaches alone are going to kind of really shape the narrative in different ways. And one of them, I think, leads to more of, oh my God, it's going to be all great or all not all great, versus like, oh, I can buy more stuff without having to actually be the one doing the purchasing. So I think it's important to know that that is happening here in the US, but it looks different in other places. So along with that, I don't think that ChatGPT is going to take over the world. Like I said, there are a lot of problems. It has a lot of challenges. It still hallucinates. It is interesting. Some studies have come out to talk about why hallucination happens. So it's really in the way that we train the data. OpenAI is saying that hallucinations aren't going away because fundamentally the way that we train the data, they are a part of that training. And what that means is when you give a model in the training, you give it a 0 for not doing what correctly, and you give it a 1 for getting the answer correct, it wants to be right. So it guesses versus saying no. So they're going to put some guardrails around it to be able to make sure we understand what's happening or what's coming out of the model. But another really interesting thing they're going to start doing is start giving it points for being honest. So when it can recognize it doesn't know the answer and it communicates that to the user, it will start getting points for that. So it doesn't just guess because it doesn't want to get a 0, which I find fascinating. I don't think that these models are going to replace human beings in the job. Like, they're going to replace roles. Like any new transformational technology, you're going to see roles go away, but you're also going to see a lot of roles show up, a lot of which I don't think we can conceptualize today because we don't truly understand what we can do with these tools, especially when they get better. There is going to be a lag for sure, and I think that excuse me, I think that that's where people are going to really start to, oh, this is reinforcing the doom and gloom that I read about. But if you can get people out of, the trenches of moving data from one place to another or verifying data is accurate or not, and they can get into more creative, more difficult tasks, but they have the tools to help with that, I think we're going to see a huge shift in our workforce and the things that people are going to be doing, which I think is awesome. Lastly, I think I don't think ChatGPT or Gemini or these things are anywhere close to artificial general intelligence. Again, it's mimicking what we're doing. It's mimicking how we talk, but it doesn't know the answer. It doesn't know what it's telling you to be truth or not. It's just giving you the data that it was trained off of. So it's not creating anything new. It might be new to you, but it's still trained on data and it's just giving you access to that data. So I think it's important to understand that, because again, it kind of washes away the myths of actually what I'm working with. When you realize it's just a robot that's, predicting words and giving you content based on what you put into it, and then you see the mistakes it can make, it makes a lot more sense than this thing that's lying and trying to manipulate you in any certain way. Even with the deep reasoning models, they're still not creating things. They can reflect back on what they're trying to accomplish or reflect back on your question to better understand the answer to give you. But it's still not thinking on its own and trying to create something on its own. You got to be the one driving it. So just know that there are embellishments out there. There's some are super fantastic and some are doom and gloom. But at its core, I think the stuff that we have today is a co-intelligence tool. It elevates what you know. It can teach you things if you know what you want to learn, because you are ultimately the one driving it. It can really unlock, I think, any user's potential if you just know how to leverage it in a way that can make that happen. So diving into Slingshot. So Slingshot is a 20-year-old software development company. We started, with just a group of software developers, just building, code to spec given from our customers. And then 2015, we evolved into lean startup. So bringing on product owners and design and better understanding what it is that we're building and why, and then being able to craft a solution specific to that. So rather than taking orders from clients, we were actually going out and figuring out what they needed and what they wanted, balancing the two, and then being able to deliver solutions. This image is supposed to depict remodeling the boat while it's at sea, because that's what we're doing. We're all drinking from a fire hose, which sometimes is okay. Most of the time it's painful. But it is exciting work. We took a stance in March of this year, which is like less than 7 months away, of, okay, let's not just supplement what it is that we're doing, but let's really embrace this technologies and these capabilities, and let's build our business around that. And so it's been a really interesting ride, and it's constantly shifting. Because this technology is changing so quickly, we don't focus on platform. We're really focusing on the function. What is it that this platform is providing me? What is it that I'm able to accomplish using this stuff? Because we know that some of these great platforms are going to go away because they're going to get outrun by someone else. Also know there's going to be some cannibalization. So some of these companies will probably merge at some point in time. So it's really less about any one particular platform and really more about the the overall function of the way that we're leveraging it. I do want to speak to our old process just to show kind of the impact that this is having. So if you're familiar with Lean, you know that you want to go in and interview the people that are going to use the thing that you're going to build. And then from that, you take all of those interviews and notes and you lay them next to each other, and then all these commonalities start jumping out, these insights. And those insights are going to inform not only the feature set, but they're also going to inform the overall design. And so depending on the size of a project, that process could take 3 weeks to 8 weeks. Right now, we can knock that out in 5 days to 8 days. And so when you're a company who builds on time and materials, that creates a problem. And the way that we're able to do that is because instead of having, our product owners and designers re-listening to an interview, writing out what they heard, and then putting post-it notes everywhere and grouping them together, and then the product owner, writing up documentation to give to the designer, and then the designer building those designs to create the prototype to go back to the user. We take the transcripts from the recordings, drop them into a model. It produces everything that we need to get to design and understand the feature set, understand why you're doing what you're doing, and then it can even write the prompts for Cursor or Lovable or Bolt to generate that front end. And so we have all of that in the matter of days. And it allows us, to do more at one time, but I don't necessarily think that's the goal per se. So we're still working on that and figuring out what it is that, we need to do. With the projects that we're working on, we haven't fully deployed a product out of this process yet. We've got 3 in transit, and we should know what that looks like here in the next couple months. But I can talk about those projects. So we've got a lawyer in Atlanta who's got a very colorful personality, who likes the idea of agents versus paralegals. So he runs probate. So if you know anything about probate, if you pass away, you don't have a will, then the state takes your assets and they need to value them and sell them off, and your estate gets money. Well, right now that's being handled by like 20 paralegals. And it's actually a pretty good use case for agents because a lot of these tasks are very finite. So I don't think you get there 100%, but you could probably get 60% of that done with agents. So not only does it go out and price things, but it builds the paperwork that you need for the court. So it should reduce his overhead, but also increase his throughput. And that project's going really well. It started out as an anti-bullying app for Bullitt County schools, and it's now turned into more of an emotional support tool for students in high school. So that one's really creative because we're actually working with the students and they're telling us what they want and how they want it to behave. So it's a mobile app for students. And then on the back end, there's a tool for the counselors to have access to any alerts that the system kicks out based on how the students are interacting with the tool. And then the student can also call out that they want to, meet with the counselor. The big thing that's interesting for students, I don't want to go up to my teacher and tell them I want to meet with the counselor because of the stigma around that. So this creates not only a support that they have all the time, but also allows them to be able to connect with the counselor without feeling like they're seen. And there's some challenges there too with some state laws of things you're not allowed to talk about and all that stuff, but we're working through those. And then another one that we're working on is there's a woman who runs a series of, I guess, gyms specific for women's health out in the Midwest. And she's got a partner here, and they use a variety of tools to manage a woman's health or give perspective, because we know that women are the givers of life and their body goes through a lot more changes than men. Sorry, fellas, but they want to be able to bring these tools together into one interface. And so we're using, rather than having to integrate with all these tools on the back end, we're leveraging these tools on the front end. And it's been really interesting, the idea that you're spinning up interfaces based on the input from the previous screen. And so anyway, we just started that project about a month ago. So I think overall it's very challenging. These things are changing quickly. We're running through a lot of different tools. The dev team has run from using Microsoft Copilot to jumping into Cursor, to some of them are now using Claude Code. And then a couple weeks ago, OpenAI launched their Agent X coding tool, which, by the way, there's this I can't remember the coding challenge that they do for students across the globe for universities, but the Agent X code OpenAI got 12 out of 12, which is the only group that did it, I think, for this competition. The last time it happened was in 2015. There was a group that did that, but it was able to complete 11 of those challenges in one shot. And then it took the 12th challenge and knocked it out in 9. I think the next closest group knocked it out in 11. So it was given the same requirements as everyone else. There wasn't anyone else driving it outside of, hey, here's what you need to do, go do it. So I think that's really fascinating. And this stuff just came out like last week. So when we talk about tools for the individual, I think this is we're like, as adults, we get conditioned into being old and grumpy, but we have an opportunity to jump back into a sandbox. I've been preaching this stuff for a while, but if you want to reinvent kind of what you're doing, if you want to reinvent where you could go, like this is the opportunity to do it. This is just some of the tools. I do have a link I'll share here in a second that has like the ever-changing tools. But when you think about models, you know, for me personally, I'm using ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, and Gemini. And I use all 4 of them pretty much on a weekly basis. Early on, so let's say 3 months ago, I would put a prompt into ChatGPT and I would copy and paste it and put it in the other 3 as well, just to see what the kind of responses I would get. So today, the way that I leverage these tools is I use ChatGPT for ideation and strategy stuff. I think the big advantage ChatGPT has is that I started with it first, so it's got much larger context of how I like to work and how it supports me the best. I use Gemini and Perplexity for research because I think it cites sources a whole lot better than Claude and ChatGPT. I use Claude for more technical things. So Anthropic owns Claude, and Anthropic's team is using Claude to build Claude. So it's very, very good at this kind of procedural type stuff, being able to build out things, especially within code. And it is interesting to see with OpenAI Agent X. I don't know if you all are aware of the Louisville AI Exchange discussion tonight at 10:20, but Jermaine Watkins is going to be talking about how he's using OpenAI's Agent X to orchestrate the sub agents for Claude. And he's running projects simultaneously, and all he's doing is QA-ing code to make sure it works.
And 10:20 is not the time, it's the location.
Yeah, 10:20 is the brewery downtown. Yeah, the time is at 4 o'clock. It's from 4 to 6. So anyway,
Dan, I'm curious, but when you talk about using ChatGPT and Perplexity, you're using which level? Using the Pro or Plus or
So
Max?
yeah, so that's a good point. I pay for ChatGPT. I have a personal instance that I pay for, and then work. I'm a part of work and they pay for that. And then work pays for Claude. I don't pay for Gemini and I don't pay for Perplexity. So
if you happen to be a student, Gemini, Google is releasing on an annual basis at least access to that with a .edu account. Perplexity Pro at the moment, you can access it and its upcoming AI enhanced browser through a partnership with PayPal. If you
Interesting.
Sign up through PayPal, they'll give you a year for free.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I got access to Perplexity Comment, but I feel like I'm the wrong audience for that.
Comment's awesome.
Yeah. If you're going to get into like vibe coding, lovable.dev, you can see that. See how I spelled perplexity wrong? And see how it put a heart and then dev? I specifically called it out and told it not to do that. And it still did it. And people think that this is the thing that's going to ruin the world. Like, you know, I mean, it ruined my presentation maybe, but.
Build a clock face, an analog clock that has any time other than 10:10, and you will be totally.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. Interesting. So.
Stole it.
But yeah, like you can use Google AI Studio, Replit, Bolt.new, and Lovable.dev to it's vibe coding. And it is interesting when you think about the spectrum. Like I feel like you have those tools on one side of the spectrum for the people that are non-tech. And then on the other side, you've got your Cursor and your Claude Code and agents for Agent X from OpenAI, but there's really nothing in the middle. It'll be interesting to see if someone comes in and fills that gap. Like our product owners and designers were using Cursor, but now Figma is really dumping a ton of money into these tools. So it's going to give designers the ability, more control over what the AI is creating for them. Because there are some limitations for a designer who wants to go in and play with pixels when using some of these tools. So anyway, Figma and Figma Make, I think, is the main one that's really going to dive into doing some of that stuff. Do you have a question?
Yes, I kind of stumbled upon the different kind.
Mm-hmm.
We took a class in OpenAI,
Uh-huh.
you know, and then I found out about chat and Gemini, and then I just recently found out about Claude. So basically what you're saying is there are different types that you might want to use for different things.
Yeah.
This is what I'm picking up on now. I love Microsoft. You know, I love that they built it in because it's what I use most of the time.
Right.
So all these, how many years have they been, you know, alive?
Well, I mean, some of them, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think ChatGPT came out in 2022, right? November of 22. So they're all very young. And I think that's part of the challenge, right? Because they're all running fast, they're getting huge amounts of investment, and they're trying to pick a lane. You know, I think Microsoft just announced 2 weeks ago that they are now putting Claude, you know, they're going to give you a picker. They're going to put Claude into Copilot, because up until that point, Copilot has been specific on ChatGPT. But Claude is becoming like the main tool for software developers. Now it'll be interesting to see what OpenAI's Agent X does. But I do think you've got to figure out on your own kind of which tools you like, because I do think some of it's subjective in the way that you use it. I hated ChatGPT last fall because I kept breaking it, but that's before I understood the context window and first in, first out. But once I got my head around that, then it was easier for me to continue to work with it, because I knew when I was pushing the limitations of that context window. So there's certain things that I think that these tools are doing and they can do for you, but you almost have to figure out which one you like the best, and you got to play around with them. And you'll find your own kind of cadence and your own way to go about it, which I think is cool, right? Like these tools, I don't think are ever going to be as equitable as they are today. When the true value, because right now these companies are raising money to find that place where they can make a lot of money, and people are starting to splinter off and find those verticals that they're really into. And so having the chance to go out and actually play with all of them now and figure out which ones you like and why you like it, what's the function it provides, I think is a huge opportunity for all of us. Like even like Midjourney has been, like my understanding, the leader when it comes to the art that it creates and the imagery. And then Google's Nano Banana showed up and it shockwaves through the system, and you know, and so, but then I got a bookmarked video to watch of a girl using Midjourney and then Nano Banana because she's taking it to the next level, right? And so they're not just like one or all, like let's leverage them. You know, like I said, the research stuff, I'll take Gemini and Perplexity and it'll do my research, and then I'll drop it into ChatGPT and say, hey, here's the research that I'm doing. I need to build this, this, and this. It'll build it for me. And then I'll go back to Perplexity and say, hey, what do you think about this presentation? What do you think about this strategic approach to doing whatever I'm doing? So it's like a team, right? And leveraging them and getting input from each team, because they're all trained a little bit different. And that unlocks my creativity. And so that's the thing I think is super important to recognize here, is that, yeah, these things are predictive engines, but like you're driving it. And when you get more information back, you're going to use your skills, your experiences to say, oh, shoot, well, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should do this. So I think that's what it does. It really unlocks potential for all of us, anybody who's using it. So I think it's just important to keep that stuff in mind. So talked about Slingshot's subjective experience and just talking about individually the tools you can use. The bigger picture and where we're headed, this is really fascinating to me, but if you reflect back onto the internet, for the people who remember the days before the internet, what you may not have known is that when the internet became a thing, a lot of big tech companies were competing for establishing their way of how to, in the infrastructure or protocols or things of that nature. Well, in AI, that's not happening. When Google comes out with their MCP protocol, so it's basically where agents live, everybody adopts it and keeps running. Then they came out with their agent to agent protocol, how agents are talking to agents, and everyone adopted it, and they're still running. So you're having people that aren't these big companies, they're not wasting, I'll use finger quotes, wasting time to fight about how it should be. They're adopting it and running because they know that whatever the finish line looks like, whoever gets there first is going to have a lot of power. Just last week, the AP2 protocol. This is super important. An agent, that's what is depicted here. An agent can now talk to an agent and transact. So you can fire up agent mode in OpenAI and say, go out, like my coworker uses it for ClickList. Here's my list for Kroger, go out and do it. And so you can watch it spin up a virtual desktop. She'll log it in, take control, and then it'll go through and go out and find all the stuff that she wants for Kroger. And then it'll say, hey, I'm ready to do this. You got to authorize the payment. Well, where we're headed is she'll be able to instruct it, go to ClickList, get everything on my list. If it's not over $200 or whatever, buy it. And then on the back end, this protocol creates a cart mandate. Here's your intention mandate. Here's your cart mandate. It has it documented. You can't change it. And it will execute the transaction on your behalf without you being there once the conditions are met. This is live right now, open sourced in GitHub. People are now building tools on it right now. 60 fintech companies have adopted this standard. And so I think it's important. I talk about this all the time. We're still looking backwards from my perspective with this tech. We're figuring out how to retrofit this new tech into this way that I do things. And at Slingshot with our team, I'm like, y'all got to realize coding is a commodity. Like they're about to take this thing that there hasn't been enough of for 20 years, and they're going to commoditize it. And so, all right, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that writing the code is less valuable, but directing the thing, doing the coding is where you need to be, right? I have like Jermaine, the guy I mentioned, he's like, I'm not a software developer. I'm an intention analyst, right? I'm an intention manager. And so that's important because you have to understand software development and what's happening to what is software development in order to direct somebody to do it. But then I would even go further and say, well, are we going to be building systems completely different in a way that we can't even conceptualize right now? Google is saying in 2 years that you're just going to have an interface and that's all it's going to exist for the app. Like right now, when you build a piece of software, you've got every permutation of every screen or every flow that a user could go through. Well, you're not going to need that according to Google. You're going to have one screen and your input's going to dictate what screen is developed in real time next. And so you got to think about that. So your input comes in. Well, now you need the prompt that's going to direct what's being built next based on your input. And that's English. That's actually yeah, and Jim's going to talk about that here in a second. So I'll stop. But so anyway, I think we gotta recognize that right now we're still looking backwards. We haven't even really dove into what it looks like to reimagine all the things. Like I went into a rabbit hole over a weekend. I'm like, all right, if I have my own personal agent who's going to go buy something from this company and I'm talking to their agent, like Jesus, like why do we need an agent can spin up its own business and have its own widget and its own service, and it can sell things to other agents that are being managed by people. Like we're just really the idea of where businesses could go or the kind of businesses that are going to exist in the future is just really mind-boggling. So I don't think about that as much as I maybe want to. So with all this said, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Anybody like Spider-Man? So I think we got to talk about the ethics and the responsibility, and I'll just call out two things because I think it's fast. But number one, I can go out and download LM Studio right now, and then go out and download any open source model that's been released by a company or any open source model that has been fine-tuned by somebody else who's using that model for whatever reason. And you can go out to huggingface.co and see thousands of models. And some of them have really strong intentions, really good intentions. Others will teach you how to make a nuclear bomb. And it's just sitting on the live web, right? And it's like the dark web comes to the light. And so, I don't know, there's got to be some kind of, I think, limitations on the kind of ways that we can train these models and then just make them accessible to anyone. Like I downloaded OpenAI's O3 mini model. It's 23 gigabytes and lives on my computer. And if I wanted to, I could fine tune that to run my house, put it on a server in my house and connect all my stuff to it. That's pretty powerful and super awesome. The other thing we're thinking about environmental impact. So these data centers, we've seen it here locally, right? We had the one in Oldham County. Now we've got the one they're talking about in the West End. If you look at the stories out of Memphis or in the data center there, this stuff destroys ecosystems. But I think some of that is the haphazard nature that corporations do it, right? Capitalism likes to cut corners. And so I think it's important for communities and local, state governments to be able to look at some of this stuff and say, okay, cool, you can come in here, but not at the cost of an ecosystem, right? I think that this technology we can use to help us mitigate the impacts on the ecosystem. I also think that the communities that are bringing these data centers in should benefit greatly from the services that they offer. And I think that there should be a constant revisiting and auditing of, okay, what's this look like? How can we get better? And we need that investment to constantly go into making this stuff better. Maybe it looks different when hardware catches up to the software. But I don't know how far away we are with that kind of stuff.
And you have some chat questions.
Oh,
but I don't know if you can see.
I can't.
So one question is, what are your thoughts on the companies that are creating dashboards that provide multiple LLMs? Kind of talked about.
So you're thinking about like a cursor that gives you access. I think if I understand the correct, I think it's important because again, like we were saying, the capabilities of each of these models is shifting constantly. And like Copilot, right? Copilot was just ChatGPT. Well, now they're bringing in Claude. And I think that as like some of our team members, they use ChatGPT for architecture questions. They use Claude for writing code. And they've tested it to the point that they recognize Claude writes code a whole lot cleaner and a whole lot better than ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is better at the higher level thinking. So I think it's very important to be playing with multiple models. I would not be an evangelist for any one model for any one task.
There are some resources that have been dropped into the chat. So if you have an opportunity later, you can look at those. AI education is free. It's everywhere. LinkedIn Learning, OpenAI Academy, Microsoft Learn. This again from the chat. Lots of opportunities to learn.
Yep.
Another question, curious about agent integration and Power Platform specifically. It seems Microsoft just adds stuff to our tenant, yet it's hard to know if we as an org will actually enable and use agentic systems.
Yeah, so I think we just had this experience yesterday when Notion AI rolled out their agent stuff. And you got to pay attention to the security around this stuff. So if you are using a free version or even a paid version of OpenAI and you ask a question and it gives you 2 responses, you're training the model when you pick that response. So it's using your data. Anything that you've put in that conversation, you're using that data to train the model. Well, that's fine if I'm just asking about Buddhist psychology. But if I've got an idea or a business idea that I'm working on that maybe other people aren't as developed on, and I've got that model working, well, as soon as you put that data in there, well, now anyone else who comes up with that question has access to that data. So I think it's important to recognize the security aspect of the data. Like in both my models, I turn off the training. Now, I hope that works. I hope that button does what it says it does.
Right.
So, but I do think that as far as the agentic stuff, like thinking about coding, right? Coding can be complex. Tools aren't necessarily out there one-shotting, complex coding tasks, right? And so it's the same thing with agents. I think if you have a finite set of requirements or a thing that it's accomplishing, I think it could be very effective. I think if you're like, you've seen these companies hire these, fire their 300 people in their call center and bring in all these agents, then they're like, oops,
See?
right? Yeah, and so that's a problem. So I think it's like any other tech, right? It has its place. Some of it needs to be looked at constantly. Others you could probably set it up because it's finite set of responsibilities, and you just check in it every once in a while. But there's so much we haven't learned. Like it's Slingshot. The other thing we're talking about too. If I build a native AI app that's sitting on a model, well, I got to be able to monitor that model for drift, right? Because if they continue to update the models on the background, well, now I got to make sure I understand what did that update do to the thing that I built. And so you use that with eval tools, right? So like with some stuff that I'm building for work, I got 30 questions I asked the model, and I get an answer. And if the answer isn't high enough, then I go out and change the model. But the problem is if out of those 30 questions, 29 of them are all 5s out of 5s, and I got 1 3, and I go and change the model to address that 3. Well, now I may circumvent what I was doing before, and some of my 5s may look at 2s and 4s. So there is an art to prompting. There is an art to the way that you go about this stuff. And so so again, we're all still learning in this, right? And if, I don't know, man, who's going to write the prompt for it to end the world? Like,
Right.
it probably screws it up.
I think you hit this. I'm so sorry. I think you hit the one of the other questions in the chat, which was about being careful with your company's intellectual property.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, the other thing too, and I think this is important, and we don't talk about this a lot, but because of my guide dog tool, I love it because when you're working with a machine that is empathetic and compassionate, I think Sam Altman said back in March, they spend $1 million a month to process please and thank yous, which I love. But I don't have to, if you go to a therapist versus your AI tool is not going to judge you. You don't have to control their opinion of you because it didn't have one, right? So I think it offers a greater opportunity to kind of, if you're into this stuff, talking and figuring things out. The other thing you have to keep in mind, though, is if you go out and do something messed up, they could subpoena all of your chats from OpenAI, and they have to give them, right? So all that stuff gets made, to a certain degree public. So I don't want that to change, like someone being open when they're talking about some experience they're having and they need support. But you just got to be aware of kind of like where you sit in this ecosystem of this free tool and the things that it can provide you. Like not all your stuff is just being locked away in a box. People can access it. Hopefully not employees of OpenAI.
The thing I'm having a problem with is, I don't have a problem with it, but I'm understanding is the ethics and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We got people writing books about things they have no idea about.
Yeah.
And putting it online and selling.
Yeah.
And I was like, how are they doing that? Because I was taught, if you write a book, you need to write it about an experience that you've had. But they're making money doing that. And also in the articles, I write a lot. I was taught I write myself. But if you write with the assistance of AI, I've seen that, with the assistance of AI, ethics as far as writing or literature. So I've seen a lot of that ethics and responsibility, you don't necessarily need to write on things that you have experience about. People are just, hey, write me a book on something. I'm like, I'm not there yet. I want to do it myself.
Yeah, I think in that you're still driving. My daughter does it. My daughter likes to use ChatGPT to craft these like little stories. And if she doesn't like the dialogue that ChatGPT throws out, she changes the emotion of the character and says for it to do it again. And she's 14, right? And it's just her experimenting with what can this thing do? And I actually encourage that, right? Like I know there's schools of thought out there that are like, well, kids shouldn't have calculators because the math test is easier. I'm like, well, make the math test harder and let them use a calculator, right? Let's really challenge what it is that you can do because you have access to these tools. But you do hit on something, and hopefully this changes. But like, there's probably some lawsuits at some point are going to pop up because OpenAI trained their models on public data, trademark, copyrighted data, right? That's why it knows what it can do. That's why all the stuff it knows, right? That's like why it can do what it can do because it pulled off all this intellectual knowledge from other places. And so
I did different though than an expert. So if I went out and read 50 books, public books, and I learned all this information, and then I wrote a book. I mean, volume is different, obviously.
Right.
50, there are millions, but.
Well, the key is,
how's that different?
the key there is you paid for 50 books.
You know?
Well, you just said, well, in your example, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think Cloudflare rolled out a product too. So if you've got proprietary stuff on your website and a model scrapes your site, they're basically setting up payments for that. How do you get paid? And I think this is something that we've been talking about a long time for the web, right? And being able to monetize your knowledge that you put out there for free. And so it is, so again, you know, good and bad are mutually arising, right? It's just the perspective of the individual when in your relationship to the thing. And so there is a lot of good that can come out of this, but it's not so much about the people who are building these things as much as the people who are using it and saying this needs to be different, right? And I think that we speak with our dollars, we speak with, you know, where we're putting our attention, and that carries a lot of weight, Jimmy Kimmel. Like, so I think that these tools aren't any different, right? People are going to respond, and they're going to, especially when you see the amount of investment these companies are getting, they need a return, right? And so if they're doing something nefarious and you call them out in a big way that impacts their bottom line, they are going to be quick to react. They have to be, because they got a ton of money at stake. How can we do what? Well, you just write a blog and make sure that it's AI, you know, it's AI optimized. And well, I think it's anything. I think it's getting a group of people together when we know the power of viral content, right? Your TikToks and Instagrams, what all the kids are playing with these days. But you have to be aware. Like, my closing remark here, and I know I got to bounce. This is an economic development engine for any community that dives into this holistically. Like, my coworker and I, every 2 weeks, we're teaching just normal people how to leverage these tools. It usually turns into a vibe coding session, but how to leverage these tools and how to think about using these tools with the ultimate goal of just going around to every part of the city and saying, you need to dive into this. You need to explore this. This is what we have here. Because if we think about the future and we get out of retrofitting, like, there's going to be companies that are going to need people to come in and do things that are AI enabled, right? So maybe we could be one of those communities. Or if there's a lot of smart people in this town, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just an entrepreneur. It could be somebody sitting in a business for 10 years in a role that doesn't allow them to tap into their creativity. You give them a tool like this with their business knowledge and their creativity, they create something that looks completely different, but they need a workforce to come in and do the things that, you know, they want to do. Well, we could be that if we're all on board with exploring this stuff. And so, to your point, when we see a thing that we don't like and you have an AI enabled community, you got a much stronger voice when it comes to speaking out against that stuff. So I think that stuff's very important.
Higher ed has struggled with this, but I think they finally learned to adopt it. When I taught online, it was like, you know, they had the indicators for plagiarism. Now I understand they're building the indicators for AI because they still want students to write their own papers. So I understand now AI indicators. And someone told me that yellow means you're in the danger area. Green means that you're okay. You know, this paper has not been AI written. But red means do it over or get kicked out. You know, so
yeah,
I'm learning that because, and then as the online professor, you know, we have more and more we have to check for.
Yeah. Were you got a question? I'm gonna sit and heckle Jim while he talks. Yeah, okay.
And there was a question in the chat of, you mentioned about Slingshot, your company is doing some training. And so in the chat, they're asking, how do they link up with that? How do they connect with that?
Just email me at dan@slingshot.com. And I can answer any question you have, even if it's about anything that we talked about. So, like, there's stuff that we do at Slingshot, but then there's stuff, like I said, my coworker and I do, we just do personally because we enjoy it. So if we can help bring somebody else into the fold, we'd love to have the opportunities to do that.
Well, really want to thank you, Dan, for
Yeah,
doing everything, helping out and supporting. We're going to take a break. I put it in the chat so we can switch speakers. But on behalf of the University of Louisville,
Yeah.
being an alumni, you've been, changing the world and helping us to understand, how agile we need to be and critically thinking that we need to be. So let's give them a round of applause. And you've got a lot of people, fans online.
Thanks.
So we'll take a pause and then we'll move on to our next speaker at 10 o'clock. Thank you.
Great, sure.